What is up, Bills Mafia? It is a jam-packed Monday night NFL draft week edition of Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast. We got the Wing Nuts logo up at the top. We want to tell you that we have another show already on the calendar. It's official, May 20th. Shout returns to Wing Nuts. Come on out. Set the date. Set your calendar. Come on out. We gotta get Carl out here for one of these. It's a 1 hour drive from Rochester. We'll get to that in a second. He's Ryan Talbot at the top, my tag team partner. We have special on this edition of the show, Jon Scott from Spectrum One Buffalo and Carl Jones from Rochester. Dude, this is going to be fun. We're going to do a mock draft. We're going to talk a little bit about this Aaron Rodgers trade today. We have another guest coming up at 8:45 from The Athletic. We'll get more into that later on tonight. Let's go around the horn. Ryan, John, Carl, how are you guys?
Doing great. Excited to talk draft. Excited to talk all things Bills.
And I'm excited to have Carl next to me, just like we found out at training camp last year that we actually grew up next to each other, just a town or so over. So, C-Town representing here on the Buffalo Football Podcast.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you guys allow me back on. And like John said, anytime that I'm not outnumbered with the Cleveland stuff, I'm always cool with that. So I'm happy to be on, guys.
I'm a big Cleveland fan. I got to tell you, I was there over the weekend. We took the kids to Guardians game. They got smacked around on Saturday, but man, we went to the right game. Big back-to-back homers. I think the pitcher was making his NFL or his MLB debut, 8 strikeouts, something like that. It was a fun game to go to. The weather was a little bit chilly, but we brought blankets. It was fine. My daughter took like a 4-inning nap, which was clutch. She was energized for the 7th inning stretch. It was a great time. Cleveland is a great city. We want to stay downtown next time we go. It really looks like they're doing some great things. All right, before we get into this draft, I got to bring up the fact that it was just announced. The Bills are returning to St. John Fisher in Pittsford. Ryan is excited because his favorite thing on this planet at this point are the black raspberry milkshakes at the Pittsford pub. Or no, not the pub, the dairy.
Dairy. Yeah, the creamery there. Yeah, great milkshakes. Looking forward to getting one while we're down there for training camp.
Ryan or Carl, what does this mean to Rochester? Because this is something that for the last couple of weeks, I've been getting text messages. I've been getting worry texts from Rochesterians talking about, are the Bills coming back to Rochester? And I'm like, I really think they are, at least for one more year. What does this mean for the region over there?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, obviously, Buffalo is not too far of a way, but for those who want to see the talent up close and personal, it's a free event for the fans, so that's always dope to see. And they get to see Josh Allen, be able to not literally touch him, but, be in the same vicinity as him and be able to watch the growing pains of the Bills and how they begin to make their team. It's always cool for them in that regard. And there's a nice 2 to 3 week period where the entire town is just all about the Bills. So we ain't got to go west and go all the way out there to Orchard Park. So from a media perspective, I'm ecstatic. I don't have to drive an hour and 15 minutes out there all the time, but it's definitely cool, especially from the fan perspective as well.
You're going to get these visuals again. If you're up at the top of the bleachers and you look over as the players walk down, this is where we kind of walk down. Look at that beautiful ball dome from Talbot up top there. And I even got this one. There's me and my good friend Carl Jones just walking to work, getting ready to get after it. I don't have a picture of John, but I did want to shout him out. Look at that beautiful bald dome that he's added to the hair is gone. That thing is looking beautiful. Welcome to the club, man. I like it.
I appreciate it. Your daughter, according to the comment from your wife just now, says she still likes me too, hair or no hair. So
exactly.
At least someone is still embracing me with the new do.
Heather, not a fan?
No, she likes it. She does.
Okay.
But, I mean, whose opinion truly matters more, my wife or your daughter's?
That's fair. I'm not going to answer, though. I don't want to get anybody into any trouble. All right, mock draft is starting right now, and the Carolina Panthers are on the clock. And how we did this, I sent the order. We're going to alternate. So we're going to go, John's going to have the first pick, Carl number 2, Ryan number 3, myself number 4, and then we're going to start it up all over again. And we're going to fly through these picks. The only time we're really going to spend any time is talking about some of the scenarios maybe where the Bills could potentially look for a trade up. There's been a lot of smoke around that the last couple of weeks. There's been several insiders, analysts that have talked about it. We'll talk about what our thoughts are on a potential trade up and if there's even really value to do so in this draft. But let's start off with John. You got the Panthers. What are they going to do?
Unfortunately, as much as I wanted it to be my guy CJ Stroud, it appears all systems go for Bryce Young to be the number 1 overall pick going to the Panthers.
So Bryce Young, I think that's about as, send the envelope to the commissioner as there is right now. So we got Bryce Young out of the way. And this is where the draft gets interesting, Carl. There's a lot of different scenarios that could play out here, even, as recently as the last couple of days, starting, some Texans might not even take a quarterback. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of rumors about this pick right here. I'm not going to go quarterback just based off of all of that chatter. Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech personally wouldn't be my choice, but that's what I'm going to take right here if I was the Texas GM. DeMeco Ryans, former defensive coordinator for the 49ers. People are saying he wants his guy on the defensive side of the ball, so he's going to get his version of Nick Bosa here at number 2.
And let me ask you this, because Tyree Wilson has been a guy that over the course of draft season, I really think around the combine, people really started to learn his name. Will Anderson was the guy going into the season. The production was there. What do you think when thinking about it through a team lens, are teams seeing when they're thinking maybe Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson?
Traits, and more traits. At that position, it's a traits position. He's 6'6", I believe 270 pounds. Not necessarily the freakiest athlete, but in terms of the size and what things he can bring to the table in terms of his measurables, I think that's going to propel him over Will Anderson at number 2.
Nice. All right. Shout out to Pro Football Focus. We're using their mock draft simulator tonight on the show. Ryan, you're up number 3, Arizona Cardinals. All the rest of the quarterbacks are on the board for them at 3. They have Kyler Murray. Apparently they went to Oklahoma as an organization to support his statue that was erected there, which is, I know that's a separate conversation. We can get into another show, but the Cardinals up here at number 3. Who do you got?
Yeah, realistically, this is going to be a spot they'll likely trade out of. This is going to be a team that's desperate for a quarterback and might try to trade up. I actually had Wilson penciled in for the Cardinals, not knowing what Carl was going to do. I'll go Will Anderson here. Cardinals need D-line, O-line, defensive back. They need a lot of positions. So value meets kind of a need here. I'll go with Will Anderson.
All right, and that gets us to the Colts here at number 4. And, they have their pick of, 3 of the top quarterbacks in a draft that if you really go back to before the combine, it's been consistently, if you're looking at mock drafts, these 4 going in the top 10. And I think if you're the Colts, you're sitting here in a really nice situation where, especially if the quarterback doesn't go at number 2, you just sit on your hands and you wait. I don't think there's any, unless you absolutely love Levis, Stroud, or Robinson, I think you just sit there. And here's the thing. There's a lot of questions for all 3 of these guys. I think, if I'm looking for upside, I love the idea of Robinson at this spot because of the potential ceiling and the limitless nature to it. Obviously, he comes in with the lowest floor. There's a lot of work that you have to do. But I think, with the regime there, that I think they could shake up the draft a little bit here if the smoke is true around CJ Stroud. Me personally, I would take Stroud at this spot, but I just think that there's just enough. We've seen enough over the last couple of years where some of these quarterbacks that might be a little bit raw, but come with more of that higher end upside. I think that might end up being the pick. And I'm going to go Anthony Richardson here at number 4 to the Colts. Back to John, Seattle Seahawks.
And I would have done Richardson because they have Geno Smith in Seattle. I felt that there's more of a gap there that you could take a freshman year or a redshirt year. But I don't think they want to do that with a guy like Stroud. So I'm actually going to go Jalen Carter here at 5 to Seattle.
Mm-hmm. And I should mention, too, I've heard reports that the Colts want somebody that's a little bit more ready to go from the jump. And so Richardson would probably be a little bit different than you're seeing on a lot of mocks. But I think in the end, they're going to take the best player. They got some time. That whole regime there that Ballard and Irsay brought in, they're going to have some time to develop. It's not going to be overnight. And they pick in the top 10 again in 2024. I don't think that's the end of the world. And I think I like the Richardson pick there. Lions at 6. Carl, who do you got?
I got to go with Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon. fluid guy, taller guy, I believe, ran really well at the combine. They need a lot of help on the defensive side of the ball. The offense is exciting for the future, but defensively, they have a lot of holes. And I personally think Gonzalez is a future Marshawn Lattimore type of guy, with a taller guy who can move really fluidly from that position. Big fan of his, and I think the Lions will be ecstatic to get him here at 6.
And if you could, I mean, obviously the Bills fans probably not spending a bunch of time at the top tier cornerbacks, but what separates him from Witherspoon in your opinion?
His size. I think Witherspoon is a junkyard dog. He's going to fight. I mean, you look at his highlight tapes, and not necessarily picks are going to show up, but it's going to be the big hits, right? Mm-hmm. I think Gonzalez is a guy who's a little bit more fluid, gets in and out of breaks a little cleaner, which I think for the NFL level, I think it's a little bit more enticing.
Okay. All right, Ryan. Raiders are on the clock.
Yeah, you could go a line here to protect Jimmy G, but I think with the quarterbacks available, they're looking for the heir apparent. Garoppolo is not a long-term guy. They had Levis and Stroud in for top 30 visits. I'll go Will Levis here for the pick.
Okay. And I think Levis actually makes a lot of sense in that spot too, because with Garoppolo there, I think Stroud is like more ready to play right away, and Levis might need a little time. So I kind of like that pick. All right, I'm going to come back here. Obviously a lot of smoke today with Peter King's mock draft. He's hit on the last 2 first-round draft picks. He mocked Kyle Pitts to them a couple years ago, and he mocked Drake London to them last year. He's got Bijan Robinson, but with Stroud on the board and falling, I think this is a good spot to maybe trade out if you're the Falcons, but I'm going to have them stick and pick, get their quarterback of the future. I'm going to go CJ Stroud here to the Falcons, and now all 4 of the top quarterbacks are gone off the board. John, the Bears need a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You got an Illinois kid at a corner, a spot they need, and Skoronski, another Chicago guy, sitting right there at another position that they need. I'm going to go with Peter Skoronski because protecting Justin Fields was miserable, and it's priority number 1.
All right, Carl. The Eagles can go in a number of different ways here. They could probably even make a luxury pick. What do you think?
Yeah, that luxury pick you're talking about is Bijan Robinson. I hear you, but I think Devin Witherspoon here at the 10th spot, what I think is very enticing for the Eagles. They're kind of, I don't want to say old at corner, but I mean, with Bradbury and Slay a little bit up there in age, you can bring in a guy who, I don't know how many more years those two have, but you get a guy at this high in the draft who I think can play in this league. Witherspoon will be phenomenal for the Eagles here at 10.
Yeah, I like that pick too because, I think they got Slay back on a 1-year deal. And if, you draft a guy like Witherspoon, he comes in, impresses, and maybe you want to move Slay. If things I don't think are in a great spot there anyway. I know he's coming back, but there was obviously some social media stuff. Very interesting pick there. I like it. Tennessee Titans, Ryan, you're up.
Yeah, Paris Johnson. I like to pick their offensive line. They need help at that position. So that's kind of the direction I'm going to go for the Titans.
All right, so Tyree Wilson at 2. The Texans come back around at 12. I was kind of thinking Bijan Robinson here for a moment, but I think that, we've heard all the buzz, and if the Texans don't get that quarterback in the top 4, this might be a little bit of a reach, but depending on who you talk to, some people have Hooker rated higher than Will Levis, and some even more than CJ Stroud. So I'm gonna give the Texans a quarterback. I don't think they want to go into the season with just Davis Mills. Now, Hendon Hooker's coming off a pretty bad injury, and you don't know how long he's going to be, how long it'll be till he's ready. But I think they're going to want to come out of this first round with a quarterback at this 12 spot. It's not the perfect fit, but again, quarterback value there. Packers on the board here at 13, and we're going to go to Ryan, who had this pick for a little bit of a trade this afternoon.
Yeah, listen, this the swap was smart for Green Bay. Right in front of them was the New England Patriots, a team that was probably maybe thinking wide receiver, taking the first wide receiver off the board. Green Bay has not drafted a wide receiver in round 1 since Javon Walker, but I think they do it here. Jackson Smith-Njigba get the first wide receiver off the board, and they're able to do that by jumping in front of the Patriots thanks to that swap with the Jets today.
Man, on his way out of town, nice little extra jab to Aaron Rodgers as they kind of go out and get Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's been begging for a first-round wide receiver for decades. And I think this is a good time to pause here, John, and kind of throw it around the horn here. Rodgers now leaving Green Bay after decades of elite play at the quarterback position. He comes to the Jets, who will be up here in a couple of picks. Let's start with John, then we'll go to Ryan, myself, and then we'll go back to Carl, who make the pick for the Patriots. Thoughts on what this trade means for not only the Jets, but the AFC East?
The Jets were a very formidable, tough out, as the Bills certainly understood a year ago, and that was with Joe Flacco, Mike White, and Zach Wilson at the quarterback position. I don't even think you need to look or hope or expect Aaron Rodgers to be MVP caliber at this stage of his career to make the Jets a better football team, especially offensively here. Was Brady for his entire time with the Bucs? No, but he was a better quarterback for them, certainly when they won their Super Bowl here. I think it's a great move. It's a steep price. Maybe Packers probably had more of a leverage. It's all about the window, too, in terms of does the price meet the return? Because is Rodgers a 1-year fix? Is Rodgers a 2-year fix, similar to what Brady was in Tampa? If it's a 1 to 2 year window, this actually could maybe set them back farther because they could have allocated some of these resources to actually find a more long-term solution. But they chose to go this route with Rodgers. Again, I don't think he needs to be MVP caliber for them to be a better football team. And it certainly adds a different level here to their offense and then makes them more of a threat for the Bills, considering, again, they lost to the New York Jets with Zach Wilson at quarterback.
Yeah. Picking up from where he left off, it's an interesting move for the Jets. It's kind of like going all in, though, for 1 or 2 seasons. It's dangerous in that, yes, you are probably a playoff contender now. But is Aaron Rodgers enough of that age? I know he's not that far removed from MVP seasons, but he's had some issues with his thumb. He's had some injury issues over the past few years. He didn't look the same this past season. So you're banking a lot on an older quarterback to come in. And quite honestly, with what they're trading away, they swap picks this year, second-round pick this year, and potentially what's most likely going to be a first-round pick in 2024, unless Rodgers somehow plays less than 65% of the snaps. It's a big haul for a guy. Unless you win a Super Bowl with Rodgers, I think you're going to look back at this as maybe a bad move for the Jets.
Just Googled it right now. Aaron Rodgers has made $305.6 million over the course of his NFL career. And we all know it, right? Well, most of us know it. Carl's still a youngin'. Still got that athleticism that, I got to say, I every once in a while I get on the basketball court and I'm reminded that I'm 40. John knows. John knows it comes in spurts. It's not
true. I don't look like I'm approaching 40 on a basketball court. Let me tell you.
Okay. All right, John. All right. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying here, as we get older, we start playing different sports, right? We like leaning in a little bit more to the golf game. Aaron Rodgers becoming really good at golf. And I just don't know if, from a mental perspective, you talk about, the age, the money that he's made, where he's at in his career, what he's accomplished. And I think like those 2 MVP seasons in a lot of ways, I think really took a little bit of the competitive fire. It was too easy for him for so long. He had Devontae Adams. Things were rolling so well. And then you come into this offseason, he was talking about 90% he was ready to be retired. I don't know. That's not a guy that I'm willing to mortgage the future of my franchise for, coming off the season that we saw him had last year. Now, at the same time, the Jets had no alternative. We all watched Zach Wilson the last 2 years. You can't run it back with him as QB1. So you had to do something. And in a division where the arms race in this division is just unlike any division in the rest of the NFL. I mean, the Patriots are an absolute afterthought in this division at this point, which is crazy to think about, knowing where we were in 2019. But we're in a situation now where it's going to be ultra competitive. These are 4, I think, competitive teams, and there's 3 potentially, elite AFC teams, or right under in that next tier, depending on where you want to put the Jets and the Miami Dolphins. That Jets defense is arguably the best in the division, maybe the best in the NFL. And so this all of a sudden becomes a really interesting division. Carl, you're up here. Speaking of the division, the Patriots have to make a big move here. Where do they go? All of the quarterbacks are off the board. We'll see if they stay in the Mac Jones business.
Yeah, JSN would have been the pick here for the Patriots. They have, as you guys know, they have no juice on the offensive side of the ball. They need any help here. I don't think a receiver is warranting a 14th pick here. Having said that, they need a cornerback after they lost J.C. Jackson to the Chargers last year. I think Joey Porter Jr. fits the mold of what they like. He's a longer guy, physical, NFL bloodlines, obviously, with his dad being a Steeler great. I think he'll be the pick here for the Patriots.
Yeah, so we bring Carl Jones onto the podcast. His first couple picks, 3 of 4 picks are cornerbacks. This was for those that you don't know, Carl was a cornerback at Syracuse, knows him better than anybody. And I know you've been studying all these guys, and they're all popping up at a very convenient time, and you're going with the DBs. I like it.
I didn't pick the order. Y'all slotted me here. That's all I'm gonna say.
Beautiful. All right, who's up next? Ryan, you up next again?
No, that would be me, right?
All right, John, go ahead.
Broderick Jones, tackle for out of Georgia, I believe it is. Aaron Rodgers can't move like he used to. Might as well protect him for the year or two that you're going to have him.
No, I like the pick there. It's interesting too because like what they have at tackle is kind of complicated by the Mekhi Becton situation. I mean, all reports are that he's going to come back and be, in the mix. We'll see what that ends up looking like, but that's a former top 10 pick. If they can get anything in terms of starting value out of him, I think they'd probably sign up for it. But, Jones makes a lot of sense at this spot. All right, next up, the Washington Commanders. I think that's me, isn't it? Is it not? This is an interesting one. Wow, this is the first one that's kind of throwing me off a little bit. The Commanders can go in a bunch of different directions here. I think, with Bijan Robinson's kind of sticking out on the board a little bit, but I don't know if he's necessarily the fit with this team. I'm probably going to go Darnell Wright, tackle, because I think at this point you're probably getting to the point, depending on which team you are, of how many first round grades you have left on players. And I think Wright is a guy that has been screaming up draft boards. Anytime you can add a day one starter on the offensive line at the tackle position, I think you sign up for that. So I'll go Darnell right here. We'll go to John with Steelers at 17.
Well, I'm on the Steelers. Okay. You know what? I love Nolan Smith. I love him. He was my favorite person at this combine and maybe ever that I've ever heard from the combine. I love him. And then he tested through the roof. And yeah, maybe he's not the biggest guy, but I just love him. And Steelers love defense. And I think he is a dog. I love him.
There it is. That's our first dog reference of the show. It only took us to the pick 17. All right, Carl. Detroit Lions at 18. What do you got?
Bijan Robinson is coming off the board here for the Lions. He fits exactly what Dan Campbell wants. Tough, rugged, helps out Jared Goff in that offense. Whenever Jameson Williams gets back on the field, compare that with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that's a nice formidable offense over there if you put Bijan over there with the Lions.
All right, Ryan at the Bucks.
Carl keeps poaching my picks. One of his only 2 top 30s was with the Buccaneers, so I was ready to take him off the board there. I'm going to go Deonte Banks, another guy that made a top 30 visit with Tampa. Plus, it's one less cornerback for Carl to take later on in this first round.
All right, here for the Seattle Seahawks, I'm going to go with one of the most athletic freaks in the draft, Kalijah Kancey out of Pittsburgh, the interior defensive lineman. I think the Seattle Seahawks needs to do some work on that offensive line or their defensive line, probably a little bit on the offensive line too, but I don't know if the value's there at the tackle position at this point. So Kalijah Kancey comes in, kind of a similar type of player to an Ed Oliver in terms of measurables, size-wise. I don't know if it's a clean comparison with the way they play the game, but obviously the Aaron Donald stuff comes into play. We'd go to number 21 in the Miami Dolphins, but they don't have a pick. The Bills fans are probably excited about that. So the Chargers are now on the clock, and I can't see them not taking a wide receiver here, but it's not my pick. So, John, what do you got?
Yeah, I think this is maybe where the run begins, if it's going to happen. And I'm going to go with Zay Flowers, breaking the hearts of Bills fans all over the place who have had him in their sights for a couple months now. But I'm going to go with Zay Flowers as Keenan Allen gets older, and you just got to continue to feed the beast to the pipeline at wide receiver for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I'm so interested to see what ends up working here because the Chargers wide receivers coach was the wide receivers coach at Pitt when Jordan Addison was there. So I'm curious to see how that evaluation comes down, because I think if I didn't know that before I learned it, I probably would have leaned Flowers too with what we've read and heard about Addison. But I want to go around here and take a quick pause, because I feel like this range here, that 2021 range, and we'll start with Ryan, go to Carl, and then we'll come back around. At this point, how aggressive do you want to be in terms of a trade up if you're the Bills to get one of those guys? Because to John's point, this is probably the range you're going to have to get up to if you want to get one of those guys. And then also, how much does a potential DeAndre Hopkins trade move you off of your aggressiveness? A potential DeAndre Hopkins trade, if it ends up being in the mix, how much does it change your aggressiveness in this draft at the wide receiver position? And is there a preference going after Hopkins in some way, whether it be after a Cardinals release or via trade, or addressing the position in the draft? We'll start with Ryan, and we'll go to Carl.
Yeah, so in terms of trading up, if wide receiver is the target for the Bills, I mean, this is about the range they have to go, because you're looking there, Minnesota, the Giants, both teams that I would think, and obviously we talked about the Chargers. So this is where that run begins, unless you're really confident in one of the players that you think could fall into your lap, a Jalen Hyatt or something like that. You probably have to trade up here. That's probably the move. In terms of Hopkins, I don't want to say Hopkins would be the afterthought, because Hopkins is still a special player, but I don't think that they're going into this draft thinking, all right, we're going to get Hopkins no matter what. If they can get a young guy on a cost control contract, someone that they're high on with a first round pick, that's probably the better route for this team, considering how much cap space they're going to have allocated next year, even to Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Von Miller, etc. So adding in another big name wide receiver, even if he's released, he's still going to probably want somewhere in that OBJ type of money, maybe $15 million per year. If that's if he's released. If you trade for him, you're inheriting a large cap hit as well. So that's the part where I think the Bills would probably rather get one of these guys in the first round, as long as they have a true first round grade on the player.
Carl, I want to ask you specifically. I just want to veer it for a second. What do you think the Bills would be better suited to going out and adding to their offense? Because Hopkins and then Addison, Smith-Njigba, and Flowers, those are two completely different flavors of receiver. I mean, so what do you think helps them more? Because obviously the Hopkins move, I think, complicates the target share, but also the alignment that Ken Dorsey would use in the offense for Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, and a Hopkins if he's added.
Yeah, I think the Bills are in a peculiar spot in terms of the receiver position, because Gabe Davis is also in the last year of his deal, and I think you're going to want to know where his money looks, because wide receiver 2 money is skyrocketing by the minute. As we know, Mike Williams got paid handsomely last year. I mean, wide receiver 2s, look at Waddle and Smith. I mean, these are top 10 picks who are being slotted in that position. So there's a lot of value in that spot. I understand Hopkins, a lot of target value there. I mean, a lot of targets you're going to give up allocating towards him. But I just think you need talent at that point. And I don't know, me personally, how I feel about this receiver class, especially in round 1. I don't know if Addison and Flowers are off the board, or if they're not attainable, because, I mean, the guys ahead of them need a receiver as well. I don't know if I want to give up the requisite assets to go get them, as opposed to waiting around 2, where I can get a guy who may not be as talented, but they're not far off.
Mm-hmm. Lance Zierlein today, John, put out or was on a podcast over the weekend, Establish the Run. It's a really good one with Adam Levitan and Evan Silva. And they were talking, he was asked, what are some things that he thinks might happen in the draft that people aren't talking a lot about? And he predicted big, splashy moves for the Eagles and the Bills. And one of them is a trade up that he's been talking about for weeks, which is the Bills to the Vikings spot to get Bijan Robinson. And, we've been having that conversation for 2 or 3 months, right? But I kind of agree with Carl's point in that the more and more you look at this wide receiver class, and the Bills have done their due diligence. They've had them basically all the top tier guys, except for Quentin Johnston, I believe, in for top 30 visits. So they're spending the time with these players to get to know them. They're obviously at least hovering around, interested in the position. Where do you land on kind of all of this? And does this draft class specifically, in the lack of top tier talent, kind of take some of the steam out of a trade up?
From all the guys experts who study film much more than I do, and really have their pulse on the draft, they've all almost unanimously made it clear that there's not this huge drop off when you go from tier 1, which maybe is Flowers, Addison, and Jigba, down to tier 2, where you're getting to Hyatt and maybe Johnston or Josh Downs or some of these other guys, Cedric Tillman. You're just not there. It's not a big enough gap, and which means it's also not a big enough gap, in my opinion, to give up really much of anything to go get one of them. These guys are usually considered to maybe have a ceiling as a number 2. So if I'm going to give up an asset to move up for someone, I'd like for them to maybe, let's start them 3-2, but let's say that they could be the one that 3-4 years down the road, or this second contract, if all goes well, can replace Stephon Diggs or flip roles with Stephon Diggs. And I don't think any of those guys are there in this draft to do that now, to take the onus off enough if you may want, and certainly down the line. So if it's between moving up or trading for DeAndre Hopkins, I think it's DeAndre Hopkins. And to be honest with you, like, I'm fine if someone drops there and the board shakes out and you're like, well, I mean, we got to take someone because we can't move back, and you take one. But as someone who's been on the wide receiver train in the first round for so long the past couple of years, I've kind of backed off of that here. And I think if the Bills really want to move the needle offensively, that's only going to happen with an addition the magnitude of DeAndre Hopkins.
So with all that said, Carl, you're going to take a wide receiver here at 22 to the Ravens?
Yeah, sorry, Bills fans. Jordan Addison comes off the board here. I think he's the best wide receiver option left, and I think he helps out that offense.
All right, 24, the Jags. Ryan, you're up.
23, the Vikings. Yeah.
My bad.
Yep. Quentin Johnston still on the board, top 30 visitor. They need some help at wide receiver, so that run continues.
All right, 24. The Jags are on the clock. And I think this is the spot, despite them going back out and bringing back Evan Ingram, the maybe potential run on tight end start. I'm actually surprised that we got to 24 and none came off the board. This could be very much be the case. I know a lot of people are talking about the high end value or of this tight end draft class, but I think Kincaid comes off the board here to the Jags at 24. All right, your old buddy, or all of our old buddy, Brian Dable in New York, up at 25.
Yeah, and this is an interesting one because they could use some help on the offensive line, but is it too high to go interior? I mean, I don't really know. I am, though, going to go. I'm going to go John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota here as a guy that they can plug there in the middle as John Feliciano has moved along out west here. And we know that the philosophy that Shane and Dable have carried over from the Bills is you build from the trenches out. And so I think that's a good way to go, especially when you have a quarterback still trying to find his way.
No, I like the pick there because there's a lot of things to like about the pairing. Number one, the Giants, Dable, Bobby Johnson, they love position flexibility. Michael Schmitz can play all three interior positions. His agent, Jeremiah Searles, played for Brian Dable. So there's obviously the connection there, knows the kind of guy that he is. I like that fit a lot. I think that could be, and it would be a little bit of an upset because I think a lot of people think the first interior guy off the board, or that's been the mostly what people have been saying since the combine is O'Cyrus Torrance out of Florida. So that'll be fun. All right. The Cowboys are up. Carl, you're up. Close us out before we get to the Bills.
Yeah. Jerry Jones going to make a wild pick here once again. He's going back to the running back duel, Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm seeing a lot of hype about how much the NFL draft circles love this top two of the running back class with Jahmyr Gibbs. Explosive dude out of Alabama. He's going to replace my old friend Zeke. And him and Tony Pollard would be a nice 1-2 punch there for Mike McCarthy. Where
does Zeke end up?
Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm still kind of hurt that he kind of fell off the way he did. I'm still hurting right now.
I'd be interested to see what wherever he lands, the fit and the style of player. All right, we are 10 minutes left in the mock, which gives us plenty of time to talk about pick number 27 and what the Bills should do with it. There's plenty of interesting names left on the board. Alabama safety, the top safety in the class, Brian Branch, couple of edge rushers, Miles Murphy out of Clemson, Lucas Van Ness. I haven't seen too many mocks where he's available at this spot. O'Cyrus Torrance, like we mentioned, Mozzie Smith, if the Bills want to go on the interior, a couple of tight ends. And I think, Michael Mayer, we've talked a lot about Kincaid on this show, Darnell Washington. I think Michael Mayer is a really intriguing player if he's available at the spot. We'll see. We'll talk it through. But let's start with Ryan, then we'll go John, Carl, and myself. Who do you got the Bills taking and why?
Yeah, I'm down to 2 players right now. I'm down to Brian Branch. I'm down to Mozzie Smith. And Branch wasn't even a consideration until we had that live draft show with Joe B. And Joe pointed out the way the Bills could use him, how they could get creative with their alignments. And obviously, when you look at the Bills in terms of their safety position, Micah Hyde is on an expiring deal. Jordan Poyer signed short term. Taylor Rapp, 1-year deal. So the list goes on and on there. And this is the clear-cut number 1 safety in this draft class. Big fall off after that. So I'm not against it. But the Bills also love those athletic freaks. And when it comes to Mozzie Smith and the testing, the athleticism, he tests off the charts. And that's another position where Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane have alluded to the fact that all 4 of those top guys in their rotation are on expiring deals. So right now, based on this board, I'm going Mozzie Smith.
Wow. Okay. John, who do you got?
The Bills have one true hole, in my opinion, entering the draft, and that's at middle linebacker. And it's been the conversation I've had on my podcast and just internally for the past month plus, is it Jack Campbell or Drew Sanders? And I'm going to go with Drew Sanders. I just think that the Bills love guys that are really traitsy, as Carl had mentioned before. And I just think he is a guy that, while I don't think it's apples to apples with this whole Tremaine Edmonds comp, I just think that he really can bring a cool dynamic too, that maybe Sean McDermott, as a new play caller returning to the play calling duties, can bring here. Because the real question with Sanders is he spent 1 year in the middle, and then some people think he's maybe better suited as a pass rusher on the edge. Maybe this is a player that can kind of allow Sean McDermott to really get creative and do something I think maybe some of us wish might have happened more with Tremaine Edmonds, and that's unleash him and have him get after the quarterback. I thought the limited times they had Tremaine do that, he was pretty good at it, and maybe Drew Sanders can be the guy that can fill in that middle linebacker spot and be implored more different and uniquely than Edmonds was.
Interesting pick. Drew Sanders appeared in a lot of mock drafts here over the last couple of weeks to the Bills at 27. That would be the first linebacker taken, inside linebacker. Carl, what do you think? 27 of the Bills. Who do you got?
Man, we're hurting Bills fans right here going on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm going to stick with the theme. Not obviously, as Ryan alluded to earlier, no one signed longer than 1 year here at the defensive tackle spot, and I'm going to take the best one off the board, and Mozzie Smith. Watched him terrorize my Buckeyes this year. Wasn't pretty. He's big. He's a bigger guy, 6'3", I believe, like 330 something pounds. Add some depth there, and the Bills don't need guys who can sit or anything like that. They need guys who can play in day one, especially with the lack of capital they have in this draft. It's unfortunate the way the board broke out, obviously at receiver and edge as well. But I would probably lean with a D tackle here, so give me Mozzie Smith.
Before we continue, and I'll give my pick, I put Mozzie Smith in because you guys win, because it was 2 out of 4, and I want to have something different, I think, from everybody else. But so you're an Ohio State fan, right? Did that change at all when you went to? I'm always curious about like the allegiances. Like when you went to Syracuse, did that kind of change it at all?
Up until like 10th grade, big Buckeye fan, like OH, all that good stuff. Then obviously I was never an Ohio State caliber guy, but I mean, in my crazy head, I thought I was. So once Urban Meyer didn't talk to me, it was I hate Ohio State. And once I graduated, we're rocking with OH again. So
all right, man, you really won in that whole scenario, though, not having to spend 4 years with Urban Meyer. That's what we like to call dubs on this show. Anyway, all right, for the Bills here, I really do like the idea of defensive tackle. I'll change things up a little bit, and it comes down to me between the tight end and the defensive end. And I know that that's going to be crazy for Bills fans, especially the guy that I'm going to mention here, and it's going to be Lucas Van Ness. I've seen him going top 10 in some mock drafts. I've listened to some evaluators who I really respect, from the Dane Bruglers of the world, Daniel Jeremiah's, Lance Zerlines, who talk about just like the potential that a Van Ness comes in and brings. Obviously, the athletic testing, the physical traits. I'm pretty sure, what's his nickname? Hercules or something like that. He might have some potential to move inside at some point. And I feel like if you take a guy like this and you get that value at 27, maybe you move off from his former teammate in AJ Epinesa, somebody who I know he had 6.5 sacks last year, but maybe you trade him for a day 3 pick in this draft. And then you look to maybe address the interior or another position later on, add another pick. I'm also considering Mayer. I know that it seems like redundant with Dawson Knox under, team control for the next couple of years, but I think he's only they can get out of that deal after this upcoming season if they really wanted to. And I think Dawson Knox has been good in spurts. And I think that there is a talking point where they need to get him more involved and put a bigger emphasis on his involvement in the offense. But I think also sometimes big players make big plays. And, there's sometimes over the last 3 years that we've talked about, drops with him. And I think Mayer is a guy that comes in. He is just like, I guess it's like re-envisioning what you think that safety valve is for this offense. For so many years, it was Cole Beasley, right? What about if that ends up becoming a Michael Mayer? And Ryan, you've watched a ton of him the last couple of years. One of the things that evaluators talk so much about is his ability to make big plays on third down in those gotta-have-it moments. And I really like that addition to this offense. And it's a little bit different than Darnell Washington, who I've also mocked to the Bills. And I like that idea in its own right. But I really like Mayer. I think I might pull the trigger here because it gives you your next iteration of tight end. If you do decide to, move on from Dawson Knox as that cap gets tougher to manage over the next couple of years, that could give you 4 years and then a 5th-year option on your succession plan, if you will.
Yeah, and listen, Mayer allows you to run more 12 personnel in 2023. He is someone that he does not jump off the charts with athleticism, but he finds ways to get open. He's very savvy. He's great hands. And then, oh, by the way, he's like, he's a great blocker. He's someone that can come in and help this run game immensely day one. If you want a day one impact player that can come in and contribute, he is a guy that could do that. So it would not be the worst pick for the Bills to go that Michael Mayer route.
This was great, everybody. We landed talked through some different situations, another mock draft to offer to the masses. John, Carl, thank you so much. We gotta move on to our next guest, but you guys were awesome. Oh, we're just getting the deuces. All right, boys, take care. Have a good night.
See.
Yep.
All right. We're going to keep this train moving. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the show as well. It is all draft all the time this week as we lead up into Thursday. And our next guest, I'm really excited, Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic, crushing it on the draft trail here the last couple of months. I've listened to a bunch of your pods with Dane and Robert Mays and the group. You guys do a great job over at The Athletic. Thanks,
you so man. Much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much for sharing some of your knowledge tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, always glad to talk draft, especially this time of year, right? When it's really wild.
Exactly.
Wet and wild, as we'll say.
So we went through a mock draft exercise just now, and shockingly enough, Lucas Van Ness was available at 27. There's always stuff that's kind of crazy.
Okay.
Of the 4 of us that were taking part in the exercise, Van Ness was a pick. Although I also argue for Michael Mayer. We can talk about that in a moment. Mozzie Smith out of Michigan was the pick for the other 2. And then who did John pick, Ryan?
Oh, he went linebacker. He went Drew Sanders.
Oh, yes, Drew Sanders. So thoughts on those prospects? Because obviously the big need, if you're looking for one on the Bills right now, is at middle linebacker. I think you make an argument for a receiver as well, maybe offensive line. But your thoughts on those 4 players, and if Van Ness, somebody of that caliber, is on the board, is that like a run to the podium type of situation? What's your take on the prospect?
If Van Ness is down there that far, then that's absolutely, because I don't think that's going to happen. Like, that seems to me, that's one of those guys to me that's like, we'll see on the weekend, because I work super close with Dane, obviously, and he's been way ahead on Van Ness way earlier than most people were. And I think it took a lot of people a while to get there, but it's still like there's a range, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't, I wouldn't be shocked if he's at like 10, you know what I mean? But I also wouldn't be shocked if he falls into the 20s. So, that would be a run the card up. Mozzie Smith is interesting. I was actually just talking about him today with somebody, and he hasn't gotten enough, I don't think, buzz here. And I think it's because he didn't do anything at the combine. Like, that bummed me out. Like, if you talk to people around Michigan, some of his jump times or jump scores, I should say, are like Penei Sewell level on the defensive side, and his power is just crazy. So hasn't played his best ball yet either, and I think that that's a guy that probably hasn't gotten enough attention there.
Yeah, so following up on Mozzie Smith, athletic freak. Ever since Brandon Beane has become GM, every first-round pick of the Bills has been a top 30 visitor, obviously minus those 2 COVID years, so Mozzie fits the profile there. And the Bills have 4 D tackles on expiring contracts. So if it were to be Mozzie Smith, to a Bills fan that's maybe not familiar with the Michigan product, what would they be getting day one?
So I think super powerful head up. I mean, the 2-gapper, maybe not so much on day one, but in terms of a guy who can just play the 3-tech, he can probably play some nose and just be a powerful early down help against the run, plug and play, like if your role was limited for him. Now, as a pass rusher in terms of like everything, I don't know if it's all the way there yet, because the thing with Mozzie was like it took him, I wouldn't say like 2.5 years to figure it out at Michigan, like at least. Like he was so raw and powerful when they got him. And I remember, I live actually here in Ann Arbor locally, and I remember when they got him and they talked about, this guy's going to be a freak. This guy's going to be a freak. And 2 years, 2.5 years go by, and you're like, man, I don't know, man. Like I can see what you're talking about, but then slowly he starts figuring out how to play his gap. And, Mike McDonald helped a lot with him, I think, who's now with the Ravens. And, last year, I think he added some more of his pass rush. So I'm curious to see how much more he can add, but he's definitely an early down stuffer right away.
What do you think about the value at that spot, this area of the draft? Because we talked to Brandon Beane last week, and he wouldn't commit to how many first round grades he had, but he said it's not good. And so, and so you look at the defensive tackle position for the Bills, and one thing he did also, recognize is that they have no defensive tackles, they're rotational guys under contract past this upcoming season. There's a decision to be made about Ed Oliver and whether or not you want to commit to him long term. Daquan Jones was a real like boon for them last year. I mean, he came in and completely stabilized things on the interior and allowed Ed Oliver to play well when he was healthy. Do you think that there's value at that spot, whether it's Mozzie Smith or maybe Kalijah Cansey if he falls to that spot? Or do you think it's like, is there maybe a second round and maybe even an early day 3 type of situation where that position makes more sense?
I do think that's a decent spot if some things happen. And like, if not, he's right. Like it gets a little grim if things go the way that they're supposed to go. And then maybe you try to play the board and see if somebody wants to come up and if they like somebody or fall in love with a receiver or whatever it may be. Now, Buffalo could also fall in love with a receiver there that falls into their lap. I'm not so sure when that's going to all start. But one guy I've thought about, in the 20s around there is Clemson's Brian Brisset. And I know he has the injury situation. And I know that, he was a former superstar recruit who, didn't quite live up to, everyone's expectations for him. But he's also had the off the field stuff with his sister and then the knee and everything else. And I just, when you really look at the talent of him, he's a top 15 talent that everybody talks about in the 20s. And if he were to fall for Buffalo, I feel like that would fill a couple needs, right? I feel like at least pretty quickly because he can play a few different spots. I think he's one of the more versatile guys.
So flipping over to the offense side of the ball, because we've talked a lot of defense and the wide receivers in this draft class. One, is there a specific player you think is a great fit for this team? Or is it something where when the Bills get to that 27 range, there's a few guys that they would be more than happy falling into their laps?
I like Jackson, Smith-Njigba, and Addison with them. I do. I think that they would both be fun with all 3 of them. Johnston would be too, but more so the route runner with Josh Allen. As Josh Allen continues to develop and continues to get better, as he will, to have and Jackson, I don't think he's going to fall, but I don't know that. Like, that's the crazy part is these receivers, I've seen people that are super high on these guys and say, oh, that's going to start at like 10 or 11. And I'm like, I did a thing the other day. I don't think there'll be any in the top 15. That'd be a little surprising to me. I think that you could see, and depending on how people sort them, Jackson would be fun with them, the way he runs routes and the way he would open things up spatially. And I think Addison is like, to me, a little bit of a poor man's Jackson. So I like both those guys actually with them. And then also the tight ends guys. I think that would be fun, like in some ways. And I look at Buffalo and you mentioned linebacker earlier, like that's certainly a need and they have needs like everybody else, but they're also a really good football team that has that flexibility, you know what I mean? To just sort of like maybe experiment or maybe just say like, let's make a strength even stronger, in certain spots.
We saw, staying on the receivers for a moment, We saw for the first time, I think I've seen all draft season, Josh Downs mocked in the first round of the draft. And it was today from Peter King, who mocked him to the Bills at 27. And it's interesting because you talk about Smith-Njigba, who I think is the perfect fit for what the Bills lack in their offense right now.
Yeah.
And this is going to lead us to another conversation. But Downs, in a lot of ways, because of his route running ability, especially out of the slot, seems like a nice fit too. But is that too early, or are you in a range there where it's like, okay, if he's going to go in the top of the second anyway, and you don't have any first round grades, how much sense does that make from your perspective?
Absolutely. Another guy that I think about in the same vein is Zay Flowers. Josh Downs, Zay Flowers are both sort of undersized, really explosive football players who know what they're doing. Downs, maybe more so in some ways with the wiggle and his ability to make things happen after the catch. I completely agree with that. I think that there's a lot of guys in that range. There's some tackles in there, and those receivers, all of them. Jalen Hyatt, I think, gets mentioned sometimes too, that like they're going to go in the 40s, right? Oftentimes when we always say that about a bunch of guys, sometimes they go in like the 20s. So we'll see where it all goes. But I wouldn't hate that either. And I think that that's the biggest point. Like if you don't have a lot of ones, like if you're only at 21s and you're at 26 and nobody's there, whatever, just jump the line. Like I'm a big fan of that. Like I think some of the smart teams always do that. Buffalo's done that before. Jump the line ahead of a bunch of needy teams who are desperate. You're never desperate because I think that they're in such a good spot right now that they can kind of do that sometimes.
So is this a year where you think Brandon Beane needs to be aggressive? You talked to the media this past or the last week, and he said, if I was Las Vegas, the betting odds would be on me trading down. But I get a little antsy waiting for my draft pick, and I've been known to be aggressive. And sure enough, he's traded up last year for Elam, traded up for Allen, Edmonds in his history, and obviously some day 2 picks as well. Is this a draft class where you want to be aggressive, or with only having 6 picks, is this one of those drafts where, maybe he should follow his gut and that Las Vegas feeling of trading down by all means, if possible?
I think that it feels like that for Buffalo, that would be the guiding light, except if like whoever, if he's got like 2 or 3 of his whatever his star system would be players that are slipping and that are slipping into like 18-ish, 19, 20, something like this. That you're like, okay, like we had him in the top 10 or 12. Like if that happens, and then I think that they're always, because you're Buffalo, you're in a situation right now with the quarterback and the way they've built around him. I think smartly, you're in position, you're trying to win right now. So like, if you think that this guy that's slipping down can help you get over the hump and fix whatever lacked in the moments that you needed it to be there, and all the things you look back on, like go do it. And I think the Buffalo's in position to do that, but only if, and that's always like something we talk so much about like in the draft process, and then it never happens. So like, the betting odds would be to trade down if you can, but always keeping that in the back of your mind that you're not afraid to trust yourself. If you're grading a guy higher than the board is, trust yourself and go get him.
I'm going to ask you for your Gabe Davis take because I feel like everybody's got one, but at the same time, I also want to pair that with the DeAndre Hopkins conversation because there's a hunger in a big portion of Bills fans to go and make that trade because adding another premier wide receiver in this offense, it's interesting. It's fun to think about. One of the things I think that they've really been missing since, late 2021 is that slot presence. They wanted it to be Isaiah McKenzie. It didn't work out. Bringing in DeAndre Hopkins to me really muddies the waters of what the offense then is going to be. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just a conversation that needs to be had. And so now you're looking at Gabe Davis, who plays primarily on the outside, Diggs, who plays mostly on the outside, but can play in the slot, and then Hopkins, who's going to be an outside receiver too. How do you think that all kind of figures out? And are they better served to go get one of these smaller guys in a very top end heavy, small wide receiver draft?
Yeah, man, I'm with you because that makes the most sense. Finding somebody who can be, for the lack of a better term, it's not gadgety. That's like a bad way to say it, but like a guy who can be like a first down machine, a guy who can be like a best friend for Josh Allen, a guy that you can put in the slot and work advantageous matchups. Like, that could be, Jackson Smith-Njigba or Jordan Addison. That could be Dalton Kincaid. That could be one of these tight ends, that's really special and freaky. I think that that's 100% accurate. That's what they're missing in that offense. And that's what sort of, I think sometimes a lot of that gets blamed on Allen for like, well, it's always like he's got to just chuck it or nothing. It's either nothing or, and it's like, well, sometimes you look at how they run and it's like, well, sometimes that's all that's there. So you'd really like to see maybe if they could get a really crafty guy who could run from the slot or work from the slot. And sometimes it is a tight end. So yeah, I would probably try to get less big and, physical because they have all that, they have, if you want to pay Gabe Davis and Diggs, figure it out. You know what I mean? Figure it out and get a guy inside that can work with them because the way the NFL is moving now, as we've seen, the slot values are difficult, but if you get a good one, it's really worth it.
I'm glad you brought up the tight end position because this is supposed to be one of the deepest tight end drafts in some time. And, the Bills last year, it looked like they wanted to run more 12 personnel. They signed O.J. Howard in free agency. They go into training camp. They're trying a lot of those 2 tight end looks. And obviously Howard didn't pan out, didn't make the final 53. Is there a player that you think would be a great complement to Dawson Knox? Or, Matt alluded to this earlier in the show, Knox's contract, you could technically get out of it after this year if you feel like he's not producing at the level he's getting paid. Is there someone that you think complements Knox, or is there someone that at 27, if let's just say no tight ends are off the board yet, or only one that you think the Bills should really think about taking?
Yeah, I think Michael Mayer, the kid from Notre Dame, like that's the one that I keep wondering if he gets by Dallas. But if he does, right, like Kincaid is one that I think is going to need a little bit more time and answer a few more questions, even though he might be more talented as a pass catcher. But Mayer will fit with anybody. Like I think I think he would fit exactly what we're talking about, like a guy that could just be a blanket for Allen and be a guy that's like he's always there. You know what I mean? Like if we're freaking out and something's not working here or whatever, we can develop something where he is an outlet and he is a guy that's sort of a code breaker that gets you out of bad situations. He will be, when he gets in the league, one of the best contest catch, tight ends in the NFL, like no matter, regardless of age. If you go back and watch him at Notre Dame, like not only is he catching everything, guys, but like Notre Dame's quarterbacks weren't great. I don't know how much you watch Notre Dame, and he caught all of it. And so this guy's been ready to go for a couple of years. He would be one that if I thought about him too for Buffalo, like if he could somehow get down there, that would be a really cool fit for them.
I want to ask you throw a couple of prospects at you. Darnell Washington is somebody that a lot of Bills fans are interested in. They love, like the Bills ran a lot of jumbo package last year with Bobby Hart, So, I mean, getting a guy like Darnell Washington could really supercharge and put defenses in a bind. When he goes onto the field, that changes the dynamic of what you could potentially do. But I wanted to ask you about a couple of prospects in terms of what you think could maybe be available even at 59 in a trade back scenario, or if the Bills stick and pick best player available at 27, and then some of these other players that, I think Bills fans are excited about. So obviously the middle linebackers, Jack Campbell and Drew Sanders, are 2 names that continue to be bantied about. I mentioned Darnell Washington. Is it Benton out of Wisconsin? I always forget his name. Benton.
Yeah.
Everything I've read about him, I think I saw one draft expert compare him to maybe like a Christian Wilkins 2.0, which I think in this defense could be really, really intriguing, whether it's next to Ed Oliver or whoever else. And then Brian Branch is a guy that I don't think that there's really a possibility there, but I want to throw it at you because if the safety slide, I mean, that could be real value for the Bills.
Yeah, he's another one that I'd say, like we talked about earlier, like a guy that you trip on yourself, turning the card in, like that's Branch. Like if he were to tumble down that far, I think that would be one. Darnell is one that I wonder about, like the aggressive teams in the second round. Darnell Washington, like if you could jump up and, because there could be a jockeying a position for him because I think he's a sneaky, way more valuable guy than people make him out to be in terms of like, especially for a team like Buffalo that has a quarterback and likes to run the ball anyway. Like Darnell is an extra tackle in so many ways that can run routes and, get open and make plays. And I think that, so I've wondered about him, being sort of in the middle, if you could maybe make up and make a jump there. And then the one guy you guys have brought up a bunch, or at least maybe once, and I keep thinking about him, is Jack Campbell from Iowa. Excuse me, I had a cough there. And anyway, Jack is like, I think he's probably the smartest inside linebacker on the board. And if I'm looking at a team that's like, I want to win right now, and I want to fill a hole right now, and we have a winning culture, and we're not waiting on a guy. Like if there's a linebacker in the class I think that's him. I don't know if I would take him in the first round, but again, like if he's there in the second, and I think he will be, but like he's a guy that somebody could fall in love with. You know what I mean? So he's one that I really think would be really good on a winner, a really good team that's ready to go. Like he's not going to have any drag. Those Iowa guys are pretty much pros when they come out. They're ready, and I think that Campbell fits the bill there.
Yeah, more on Campbell. First, Sean McDermott said that he hasn't picked Luke Kuechly's brain, but is that something that the Bills are most likely monitoring? I mean, Luke Kuechly was a Sean McDermott guy, a Brandon Beane guy.
Absolutely.
Training with him, the due diligence there, the athleticism. So is that something where maybe the Bills didn't bring in Campbell for a top 30 visit, but they're definitely keeping their tabs on him?
I wonder, that's, excuse me, if history tells us what it tells us, that they haven't, drafted anybody outside of their 30 visits, and that's one thing. But I do wonder, and I got like Campbell, he's another one where the school of where do you land on him is all over the place. And sometimes anymore, all these visits come out. And I think sometimes people leave guys off the list on purpose and just hey, we're not going to do this. I saw that. I don't think Kalijah Cansey's taking any visits or whatever. I don't think anybody, and I'm is that him or is that teams just being I'm not going to show my hand here. So I've wondered about that with Campbell because he's definitely one that's eye of the beholder. There's a lot of teams that look at him and say he's not athletic enough. It's the scores aren't quite indicative of what you see on tape. And then there's some that are I don't care. He's really smart. He knows what he's doing. That defense was awesome. And he was the heart of it. If you have a winning team, he can fit right away. So, yeah, I could definitely see that being one that they're trying to stash and see where other teams think of him. You know what I mean?
All right, I'm going to send you out to deep left center. I'm going to hit you a big pop fly here. This is for the hardcores. Give me a name or two, thinking through a Bills scope, day 3 targets that you think would be absolute great fits for what the Bills kind of are looking for, whether it be in that wide receiver, tight end range, maybe an offensive lineman that people could get excited about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here, what in terms of offensive line, are we thinking what's the biggest need? Is it tackle, guard, or are we? What's
probably specifically right tackle? Spencer Brown has underwhelmed through 2 seasons, back issues.
That's disappointing. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you could look for the heir apparent to Mitch Morse, but the Bills do have some offensive linemen, interior linemen that have that center versatility already, but that's potential too.
I tell you, there's one guy that always stands out down there that is a tackle that would fit in that. Earl Bostic from Kansas, who I think Dane has a 6th-round grade on him, and he's an older guy that's been up and down. But yeah, he's super long, tested really well, is really athletic, and I think fits every modern offense that likes to run the ball and play. He can play the right side and get out and sort of block at the second level and help extend, a small thing into a big thing. Earl Bostic, that's one that I bring up a lot. I feel like every time I go back to it, who's a guy that's, I look at a Jalen Duncan from Maryland, but he's not going to be there. He'll be gone, by day 3. But Bostic's one, City So is probably a guard, a kid from Eastern Michigan. I'm not sure if he's a tackle, but there's he's in that group of guys that are just a little bit the tape is a little underwhelming enough to where he could slide. You know what I mean? And he is athletic. And if you could get him in the 5th round, I think that's a nice ad that he could maybe compete and help you out a little earlier than, Brown was such an athletic player, and it's a bummer that, that hasn't worked out. But I look at guys like that, and for a team like Buffalo, he checks a lot of boxes physically, and, that could be somebody that's hanging around there late.
Well, Brandon Beane still. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ryan.
Not so much for late round picks, but obviously we're brought to you by Syracuse.com. There's some quality Syracuse players in this draft class. Is there anyone like a Matthew Bergeron, day 2 range? Is he someone? What can you tell us about Bergeron and then any other of these Syracuse players in this year's draft class?
Bergeron is one of my favorite, probably value picks. Period. I think he's a 2nd-round pick. I'd be surprised if he's still there in the 3rd. Look at him and Van Ness are the 2 hockey players that are the 2 big. He's Bergeron's Canadian, of course, and I think he played soccer and hockey. And I was just going through his tape the other day because we ran a big feature here at the Athletic, and there's not too many guys that can pull off the jump block. He jumps in the air, lands, and still can finish. He's so athletic with his recovery in the run game. There are things as a protector and everything else that guys like that are, athletes that find football later in life, still need to work on. But I love his game so much. And then Sean Tucker, the running back, he's a guy that we probably heard too much about him. Sometimes those running backs get lost. We hear so much about them in college. They do so much and they're really productive. And then people just go super quiet on them. whether they don't test really well or whatever. And he didn't have the best testing, whatever. And I don't think he finished as well as he started. But I like Sean Tucker, man. Like, he's a super confident guy, and I've one that I like watching his tape. I always seem to go back to watching him one way or the other.
Great stuff, Nick. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you taking some time on draft week to hang out, talk a little bit of draft from a Bills perspective. Let everybody know where they can find your work and what you got cooking this week.
Yeah, guys, just on Twitter at Nick Baumgardner, NickBaumgardner. And then on The Athletic, we've got all sorts of stuff later in the week. I'm sure we've got live coverage all week long, podcasts, everything else. So check that out. And go get the Beast, Dan Brugler's draft guide. It's worth the sub alone for sure.
Seriously, it'll get you to draft night. Just pick out a chapter, go by position, and
it'll
just
get you through the
chip away
summer.
It's
what
there
it'll
you go.
do.
It will. Nick, thanks so much. Take care, my friend.
You bet, fellas. Anytime.
All right, we are cooking here, Ryan. We got one more segment to go. I didn't even tell you about this, but producer Anthony is making his debut on the podcast tonight. You know why? Big Jets fan. Big day for the Jets. Bills fans are going to be kind to you in the comments. I guarantee it.
They're going to love me. We're going to be best friends.
Going to be best friends. No, Anthony's been killing it, producing the show the last couple of months. Kind of let him get his feet wet before we brought him on for the first time. And I thought, no better day than today, my friend.
What's up, guys? What's going on?
Not too much. Why don't you tell us what were you thinking about the? I thought the Packers did very well with what they received for Aaron Rodgers. Was that more than you thought the Jets were going to give up? Were you happy with it? What were your thoughts on the initial trade compensation?
It's about what I expected to give up because they are the New York Jets and they are in desperation mode. And I do think the New York tax and all that and all the major sports is a real thing. So they are the Jets. And listen, was it a desperation move? Yeah, because they're the New York Jets and they haven't had a consistent quarterback since. Do we want to say Sanchez? If it's not Sanchez, it's not Chad Pennington. It's not Vinny Testaverde. It's probably Joe Namath. Joe Namath is the last New York Jet to play every single game as a quarterback 3 consecutive seasons in a row. So just chew on that. I think the value's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a second and a second that could turn into a first, right? I don't know if it was you, Matt, or Ryan, one of you said that like you don't want to mortgage your future on Aaron Rodgers, but is that mortgaging your future? Just a second and possibly a first next year?
So yeah, he's going to play 65% of the snaps, right? Like that's the cutoff.
That's the cutoff.
I think that's what I more meant too about mortgaging your future more so than the draft capital is the time investment. Like if we're talking about 2 seasons of average Aaron. That's who played in 2022. Let's be honest. It wasn't great. I mean, we're talking about, 89 to 92 quarterback rating for the most part last season. The touchdown to turnover or to interception ratio, probably the lowest of his career. And listen, he set a high bar. He was the MVP the 2 seasons before. He's 40 years old. He was ready to walk away from the game. What's he been doing all offseason? He's playing golf. Is he talking to his man, Nate Hackett over in New York? They got the offense ready to cook. He's going to have some talent. Listen, Garrett Williams is the real deal. I think they're getting better on their offensive line. I'd prioritize that at 15. Probably get yourself a day one starter there at that spot, depending on where you want to go. And they're going to get Elijah Vera Tucker back. And who knows, maybe with Mekhi Becton, we already know what they have on defense. It's to your point. It's a move you have to make. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if they don't win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, their franchise at the other end of this is going to be back at square one. And there's the danger of being good enough to where you can't build your roster the way that you can in terms of like flipping things. Like you can get rid of some of the older, heavier contracts, flip it and try to find a quarterback and rebuild. And then there's also the question is, do they have the people in place from a GM perspective, front office perspective, coaching perspective, to find a quarterback and develop him? So this might have been the best path forward anyway.
I think it was because, like, what else? Like, I just don't know what other option they have. And it's like you have this win now roster, right? You have arguably the best defense in football. You have the offensive and defensive rookie of the year. You honestly had 2 offensive rookie of the years if you include Breece Hall before he got hurt. they would have had the 3 best rookies in the NFL. You have the best defense in the league. You have Garrett Wilson. You have Allen Lazard. You have McCole Hardman as well. And I guess you want to include Corey Davis in that bunch. That's a legit receiving group. Like, that's a legit receiving group. You have the weapons. You have Breece Hall and Michael Carter in the backfield. Conklin and Uzama are good veteran tight ends. The offensive line is a little shaky. Like Laken Tomlinson was not great last year. But you have pieces. And I think if you use 15 to either pick a receiver or an offensive lineman, I think you're in a good spot. Now, listen, it is Super Bowl or bust. And this is eerily similar to Brett Favre in 2008. But again, what else do you have if you're the New York Jets? Like, I'm petrified of him getting hurt, and then this all blows up.
Do you still have your Brett Favre Jets jersey or no?
Oh yeah, it's like a youth small. Yeah, I have it somewhere.
Youth small, nice.
Well, the old Reebok jerseys where they get kind of scratchy and it's one of those. It's one of the old mesh Reeboks. But they had no choice, so I do like it. I don't think you didn't give up the house for him. The contract is scary, but I am hearing a couple people saying that they might restructure the deal, which would be huge for them. Because that contract is terrifying. Like, what is it? Like, he's making over $100 million over the next 2 years. Like, it's scary.
It's like 60 this year or something like that.
It's scary, but the team isn't a joke for the first time in forever. I see Thomas in the comments says Rodgers keeps the Bills honest and laser focused. The Jets are formidable. No joke. They're not a joke. They're a threat in the AFC, for the first time in a long time, really. And I think that does, speak to what this trade did. Obviously, is it ideal? Does it help you long-term? Absolutely not. But the hungry dog runs faster, and Joe Douglas kind of had no choice. So he pulled the trigger on this, and I think he kind of had to do it.
Yeah, and listen, I think Joe Douglas's job is going to be based on how this turns out in terms of whether he keeps his job as GM. As good as his draft was last year, I don't want to downplay it too much, but he had Sauce Gardner fall into his lap at 3 because of the Texans going another route at corner, and he had Garrett Wilson fall into his lap, and his other drafts have not been as good. So now you look at Rodgers, and if Rodgers does not pan out, I think Douglas is looking for a job elsewhere. So I get it. They whiffed on Zach Wilson. This is a surefire plan to upgrade the position where you feel like you have a lot of the other pieces there, but his job is definitely on the line here, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I see another comment from Trey saying, you're going to get a Rodgers jersey. I have not bought a Jets jersey since Darrelle Revis because I'm smart. Got very close with Jamal Adams, but, back next minute. That would have been an
all-time, strikeout looking type of move. Like, that is atrocious. Jamal Adams, although he had like a minute of, I guess, was he in the Rex Ryan defense?
No,
early in his career.
He was Todd Bowles.
Okay. There was a minute, but yeah, you never want to get a linebacker's jersey. Like, wait, what? No, I'm just kidding. Jamal Adams. The man.
I just want to say one more thing. Just putting it out there. Tom Brady's last pass with the New England Patriots, interception. Next year goes to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They win the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers' last pass with the Green Bay Packers, interception. Comes to a new team. Could be destiny, guys. All I'm saying.
10-7 wild card.
Yeah. It's got that written all over it. It's got that written all over it, but I'm too desperate. So I'm clinging on to anything.
No, I love it.
You're the first person I ever said that I've ever heard say Jets and destiny in the same sentence. So cheers. That's great. Like, I'm excited for you. Like, I can see you're charged up about this, and I'm excited for you and Jets Nation, because they need some happiness. Like, every time we go down to New Jersey and we gotta find the stadium, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and you're looking across the water and you see the beautiful city where they supposed to be playing, and you're just like, why? The Jets fans have to go here every week. They gotta trudge over to New Jersey and experience that, and it's so this is great. I'm excited for Grandpa Rodgers to come in and get you pumped up. I'm sorry, I had to talk a little trash.
And listen, it does well for the brand too. You had one primetime game last year, which was obviously a mess.
That's a great point.
I think Adam Schefter said they can get up to 6 primetime games this year. So listen, Woody Johnson's got to do something.
No, he's pumped about it. Did you see Woody? tweeting.
Yeah, he's fired up.
You like that? Do you like that?
Yeah,
His
I mean,
best Kirk Cousins impression.
yeah, I mean, do I love him? No, but right now,
Okay.
me and Woody are right.
Right. All right. Final thought, Ryan Talbot.
Final thought, Bills Mafia, stick with us. Busy week here at Shout. We'll be with you almost every night this week. Some late nights, early mornings following the Bills draft picks on Thursday, Friday, and then, a little earlier on Saturday with day 3 of the draft. But stay tuned, stay locked in, and we look forward to talking all things Bills and their draft picks.
You gonna be able to hang for the late nights, Anthony, Thursday and Friday, or you have to call in, like come in the morning, follow up the next day? We usually go live about 1, 2 in the morning, depending on when the draft ends.
Take a Red Bull. I'll be all right.
Beautiful. Thomas Burke, welcome aboard. Anthony, great debut, man. Some great takes. More to come. He's Anthony DeChico. He is Ryan Talbot. I am Matt Parrino, the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast. Brought to you every month by Wingnuts, and we're going to be back there on May 20th, our next live show. I can't wait for that. Mark your calendars right now so that you can plan for it. If you're local, just come out on a Saturday night. It's a beautiful time. The weather's probably going to be beautiful by then. Watch, I just jinxed it. And then if you're out of town, you want to make a little trip in, you want to build a weekend around it. We've had a few fans do that already, and it's been awesome. Meeting them, talking some Bills with them. It's a great time. Wingnuts, May 20th, Saturday night, 7 p.m. See you there. Take care, everybody.